Maybe we need to let kids play in the dirt a bit more. After all, it's their immune system's way of doing the fieldwork. This is the central statement of hygiene hypothesis.
The hygiene hypothesis suggests that reduced exposure to infection and microbes in early childhood due to increased cleanliness.
This may lead to a higher risk of allergies and autoimmune diseases by impairing immune system development.
There is a long run debate going on about whether this hypothesis is correct or not. For example, someone can say,
Research has shown that children who grow up on farms where they are exposed to a greater variety of microbes and animals tend to have lower rates of allergies and asthma, supporting the idea that early exposure to diverse microbes may help develop a more balanced immune system.
others may oppose.
The rise in allergies and autoimmune diseases may be attributed to other factors, such as increased use of antibiotics, changes in diet, or environmental pollutants, rather than simply reduced microbial exposure. They suggest that these factors might also play significant roles in the development of these conditions, implicating the link between the hygiene and the immune system health.
Someone can also state,
Our previous generation were less infected with infection.
someone can oppose.
People were unaware of them. This disease are discovered and well studied nowadays only. Maybe they had them but couldn't diagnose.
Let's hear what the experienced ones are saying.
Hello, everyone. So today the question is whether I support hygiene hypothesis or not. So it's a very difficult question to answer in today's scenarios.
So, first of all, we need to understand that what is a good habit for hygiene. So, whatever we learn from our childhood, that a hygiene is whenever you will go outside, you should come home and wash your feet, like hands, and then something that actually changes over the time. So, when we grew up, and the habits, and especially after the COVID, the concept of hygiene has been changed. I think that hygiene is important. That is necessary. You need to maintain your good quality of life, but at the same time, you need to expose yourselves to the environment. Like if you don't expose yourself to the environment, then you will not have a proper, immunity.
I support hygiene hypothesis as this hypothesis explains that like early exposure to the epitopes, like in terms of immunology, if you will understand, the more exposed you are towards the epitopes of these microorganisms or any environmental factors, the more healthy and balanced immunity it will develop. So if you go back to the timeline in the development of the immunology, you will understand that the incident that make to the development or the foundation stone of this immunization program, the Edward Jenner's contribution. He observed that the people, the milkmaids of that time, who are exposed to cowpox infection, they used to develop a very strong immunity against the smallpox, and that becomes the foundation stone for the development of the immunization. And the first vaccine has developed in that.
Current generation has much weaker immunity compared to the previous generations that we are having. Although like the current generations, they have better access to the healthcare as well as the vaccination, but before that, if you are thinking of general immunity concept, because hygiene hypothesis is more about exposure of the pathogens to, or as well as the regular microbiome or microbiota towards humans. So in presence of much more exposure, we are getting much more acquired immunity compared to the current generations where we don't get the exposure or we don't give the exposure to our children or the newer generations. They don't have this access. So the development of immunity from the very beginning, actually hygiene hypothesis proposed that if you are exposed towards more microbes, it will helpful in some way to give you more immunity. And like if you have less exposure, then of course your acquired immunity you will only get through your vaccination, which will be either passively administered or it can also active your immunity actively. But before vaccination, hygiene hypothesis helps us to get rid of the pathogens by activating our immune system. And I think that current generations, although many of us are believer in the hygiene hypothesis, but in reality we are actually not maintaining it. We should give our next generations more access to the playground so that they can have more mixed.
I can tell you from my experience that, nowadays in the city, we really don't have that much green. But when we were young, we actually used to play in the grass. We used to know all the different types of, like we play with clay.
I think so. The debate here is whether we have to confine ourselves to a very clean environment all the time. Whether we should restrict our children to go out and play. So, on one side, when I do believe that we should maintain a certain degree of hygiene, health and hygiene, so that we do not get infected with infectious disease, nor we spread the infectious disease. However, it is also very important to expose our kids to the natural environment, not create the natural environment in an artificial way, but what is out there. Of course, to also understand that we have to maintain the basic level of cleanliness in those natural environment too. So we cannot restricting people to a very clean environment is also not naturally good, because of course we are altering the gut microbiota, which is very important in our day to day. We do not understand it yet very clearly, but it is very important for our daily behavior, who we are, our health, our status, our health status, everything. So you have to have a fine tuning between what would be unhygienic and what would be hygienic, not restricting ourselves totally to a clean environment, but also give the opportunity to be out there, but knowing what we are doing.
So definitely the hygiene hypothesis work. The people who are most exposed to the antigenic or microbial immune systems are more displaying the more healthy immune responses.
It has been proved by science experiments that if you are in contact with many of the pathogens in the washrooms or in the playground or in the streets, you can have much better immunity compared to a person who don't have this access or didn't get this exposure towards any kind of this kind of presence of microbiome.
My take in this particular aspect of hygiene hypothesis would be that I'm opposing the hypothesis in a way that earlier time, if I consider my time, we used to maintain a standard hygiene, and the nature was much more cleaner than what is right now. Particularly the pollutants, the change in weather, the climate change, the amount of the pollutants in air and in other part in grassy area. So that makes the environment not so hygienic compared to earlier days. So now exposing kids to the environment can be good or detrimental based on where the location is. If it is a cleaner environment, then I think the kids should be can be exposed without major harm, and they probably will have a better life, better immunity. But at the same time, if the exposure is against pollutants, they may suffer, and they are suffering from various diseases, for example asthma.
I am still a very strong believer of this hygiene hypothesis, and I feel that hygiene hypothesis not only gives you a better immunity against microbes, but it can also help to reduce the burdens of lot of allergic and metabolic disorders. Specifically, if you if you heard about the gluten allergy or peanut allergy, it has been proved that before this extreme hygiene of sophisticated washroom or less exposure to the current generation, earlier in India, we don't see that much of the gluten allergy or peanut allergy, these kind of terms. It was mostly a Western term. I mean, now you can argue that because they are underreported, but I believe that because of the exposure to the pathogens and when we acquire them, they might help us to digest these kind of molecules which are nowadays, because of the less exposure, we are not able to digest anymore.
So, what was your take home message today?
So our question to you is, क्या डर अच्छे है?
भाबो, भावा practice करो.